In a world where the sun was dying and magic was fading, a sellsword named Grum had been wandering the earth for years, taking any job that would pay him enough to keep him alive for another day. Despite the bleakness of his existence, Grum had managed to maintain a sense of humor that often earned him the loyalty of those he worked with, and the admiration of those he fought against. Grum's origin story had been wandering the earth for years, taking on any job he could find in order to survive in a world that was slowly dying. He had seen many things in his travels, once beautiful landscapes now reduced to desolate wastelands, magic that was once powerful now weakened and unreliable, and civilizations that were crumbling and fading away. Despite the bleakness of his existence, Grum managed to maintain a sense of humor that often endeared him to those he worked with. He would crack jokes even in the most dire of situations, and his wry wit had saved him more than once. Grum had become something of a legend among the sellswords and mercenaries that roamed the land, known for his skill with a sword and his sharp tongue. He had fought in countless battles, both for and against various factions, and had managed to survive them all. However, despite his reputation, Grum had never been able to settle down in one place for very long. The constant need to find work and stay one step ahead of danger had left him with a restless spirit and a wanderlust that couldn't be satisfied. And so, he continued to wander the earth, never staying in one place for too long, always searching for his next job and his next adventure. He knew that the world was dying, but he refused to let that fact bring him down. As long as he had his sword, his sense of humor, and his wits about him, he knew he could survive anything the world threw at him. Grum's travels had taken him to all corners of the world, from the icy tundras of the north to the scorching deserts of the south. He had fought against armies of undead, battled dragons and other mythical beasts, and even survived encounters with powerful wizards and sorceresses. Despite his many adventures, Grum remained a humble man at heart. He had seen too much of the world's darkness to ever take himself too seriously. He knew that life was short and uncertain, and that the only thing that truly mattered was how you lived it. In his travels, Grum had met many people from all walks of life. He had fought alongside kings and queens, and had also shared meals with beggars and thieves. He had learned to respect people based on their character and actions, rather than their social status or wealth. And so, Grum continued to wander, always looking for his next job and his next paycheck. He knew that his lifestyle was not for everyone, but for him, it was the only way to live. He loved the freedom of not being tied down to any one place, and the thrill of never knowing what each day would bring. As the world continued to die around him, Grum refused to give up hope. He knew that there was still good in the world, even if it was becoming increasingly harder to find. And so, he continued to wander, always searching for that next glimmer of hope in a world that had grown so dark. The world was dying because of a combination of factors. The most significant of these was the gradual weakening of magic, which had been the lifeblood of the world for centuries. No one knew for sure why magic was fading, but there were many theories. Some believed that it was a natural cycle of the world, while others believed that some great evil was siphoning off magic for its own purposes. As magic weakened, so too did the natural balance of the world. The seasons became more unpredictable, crops failed, and once great forests began to wither and die. The animals of the world began to struggle to survive, and many species went extinct. The reasons being the combination of factors that was causing the world to die was complex, and there were many different theories and beliefs about what was causing it. Some of the most commonly cited factors included the weakening of magic. Magic had always been a powerful force in the world, allowing people to control the elements, heal the sick, and perform incredible feats of strength and agility. However, over time, magic had become weaker and less reliable, making it harder for people to use and depend on. Environmental degradation. As the natural balance of the world began to deteriorate, so too did the environment. Climate patterns became more unpredictable, causing droughts, floods, and other natural disasters. Soil quality deteriorated, making it harder for crops to grow. Forests were cut down and not replaced, leading to desertification and erosion. Resource depletion. as the world's population grew, resources began to become scarce. This led to conflicts over food, water, and other vital resources. Many people were forced to turn to violence in order to survive. War and conflict, the combination of all these factors led to widespread war and conflict. Nations and tribes fought over resources, ideology, and power. As a result, many cities and towns were destroyed, and the population of the world was greatly reduced. Dark forces, some believed that the weakening of magic was caused by dark forces, entities that were siphoning off magic for their own purposes. These forces were often seen as malevolent, and were blamed for many of the world's problems. As the natural balance of the world deteriorated, so too did the civilizations that had been built upon it. Cities and towns that had once thrived began to crumble and fall into ruin. Wars broke out over dwindling resources, and people began to turn on each other in desperation. Despite all of this, there were still pockets of hope in the world, communities that had managed to find ways to survive despite the odds. But for most of the world's inhabitants, the future looked bleak, and the once great civilizations of the past seemed like a distant memory. One day, Grum was hired to protect an apprentice wizard named Amara, who was tasked with retrieving a powerful artifact from a dangerous ruin. Amara was young and inexperienced, but had a gift for magic that Grum found impressive. However, she also had a habit of speaking without thinking, which got them into trouble more than once. The powerful artifact was known as the Eye of Malachite, a legendary crystal that was said to be imbued with incredible magical powers. According to legend, the eye had been created by an ancient civilization that had possessed the ability to manipulate magic on a scale that was beyond what was currently possible. The Eye of Malachite had the ability to amplify magic to an incredible degree, making even the weakest spells incredibly potent. It could also be used to perform powerful enchantments and to see into the future with unparalleled accuracy. In the wrong hands, the eye could be used to wreak havoc on the world, causing destruction on a scale that was beyond comprehension. For many years, the eye had been kept hidden away, with only a few people knowing of its existence. However, as the world continued to deteriorate, more and more people began to hear rumors about the eye and its incredible power. Many believed that if they could obtain the eye, they could use it to turn the tide of the war, or even to save the world from destruction. However, there were also those who knew the danger that the eye posed, and who believed that it was better to destroy it than to risk it falling into the wrong hands. These individuals formed a secret society, known as the Guardians of the Eye, who were tasked with protecting the artifact at all costs. As the world continued to spiral towards chaos, the stakes for the eye became higher and higher. The temptation of its power was too great for many to resist, and rumors began to spread of a great battle that was brewing over the fate of the artifact. The outcome of this battle would determine the fate of the world, and there were no guarantees as to who would emerge victorious. As news of the Eye of Malachite spread throughout the world, various factions began to emerge, each with their own agenda for the powerful artifact. Some believed that the eye could be used to save the world from destruction, while others sought to use its power to gain wealth and influence. There were even those who believed that the eye was a cursed object, and that it would bring about the end of the world if it was not destroyed. Grum, the sellsword with a sense of humor, had heard rumors of the eye and its incredible power. Although he had no interest in magic or its use, he knew that the eye could fetch a high price on the black market. He decided to seek out the artifact and sell it to the highest bidder, hoping to make a fortune in the process. As he traveled the world in search of the eye, Grum encountered a young apprentice named Elspeth, who was also searching for the artifact. Elspeth was tactless and impulsive, often putting herself and Grum in danger with her brash actions. However, she was also incredibly skilled with magic, and had an uncanny ability to sense the presence of the eye. Together, Grum and Elspeth journeyed through the dying world, facing countless dangers and obstacles as they sought out the Eye of Malachite. Along the way, they encountered other adventurers and factions who were also seeking the artifact, and were forced to fight off attackers and navigate treacherous terrain. As they drew closer to the eye, Grum began to realize that the power of the artifact was greater than he had ever imagined. He began to question his own motives for seeking it out, and wondered if he was truly prepared to handle the responsibility of possessing such a powerful object. Meanwhile, Elspeth became more and more obsessed with the eye, believing that it held the key to saving the world from destruction. Their journey finally led them to the city where the eye was rumored to be located. However, when they arrived, they discovered that the city was in the midst of a mutiny. Factions were fighting for control, and chaos reigned in the streets. Grum and Elspeth realized that the eye was at the center of the conflict, and that they would have to fight their way through the city if they wanted to obtain it. As they journeyed deeper into the ruins, Grum began to notice a change in Amara. She grew increasingly obsessed with the power of the artifact they were seeking, and started to show a disregard for the safety of those around her. Grum tried to warn her of the dangers of such temptation, but his words fell on deaf ears. Grum and Amara quickly realized that obtaining the Eye of Malachite would not be an easy task. The city was in complete chaos, with factions fighting for control over the artifact. Grum and Elspeth joined forces with a group of rebels who were also seeking the eye, and together they formulated a plan to infiltrate the stronghold where the eye was being held. They made their way through the city, fighting off attackers and dodging traps along the way. Elspeth used her magical abilities to sense the presence of the eye and to detect any spells or enchantments that might be guarding it. Grum, meanwhile, used his skills as a sellsword to protect the group and to ensure that they stayed on course. After several days of intense fighting, they finally reached the stronghold where the eye was being held. The guards had been heavily fortified, and it seemed like they would never be able to breach the defenses. However, Elspeth had an idea. Using her magical abilities, she was able to create a diversion that drew the guards away from the stronghold, allowing the group to slip in undetected. Once they were inside, they found themselves facing a maze of traps and obstacles that were designed to keep intruders out. Elspeth used her magical abilities to disarm the traps, while Grum used his skills as a sellsword to fight off any guards that they encountered. Finally, they reached the chamber where the Eye of Malachite was being held. The artifact was sitting on a pedestal in the center of the room, guarded by a group of powerful mages. Grum and Elspeth joined forces with the rebels, and together they launched a fierce attack on the mages. The battle was intense, with spells and enchantments flying in every direction. However, Grum and Elspeth were able to use their skills and abilities to overcome the mages and claim the Eye of Malachite. As they left the stronghold, they could hear the sounds of the city exploding into chaos once again. However, they were not concerned. They had accomplished their mission, and had obtained the Eye of Malachite. The world may still be dying, but they now had a powerful tool at their disposal that could help them to turn the tide of the war and to save the world from destruction. Their mission was ultimately successful, and they emerged from the ruins with the artifact in hand. However, as they made their way back to the city, they heard rumors of a mutiny brewing among the city's ruling council. It seemed that the temptation of power had not only affected Amara, but also those in charge of the city. Grum and Amara found themselves caught in the middle of the conflict, as they were approached by both sides in the struggle for control. Amara was easily swayed by the promises of the rebels, while Grum remained skeptical of their intentions. In the end, Grum's sense of humor proved to be a valuable asset, as he was able to diffuse the tension between the two sides with a well-timed joke. Amara, however, was not so lucky. Her thirst for power had led her down a dark path, and she ultimately fell victim to her own ambition. As Grum left the city behind, he couldn't help but wonder if the artifact they had retrieved had truly been worth the cost. In a dying world where power was becoming scarce, it seemed that the temptation to obtain it was too great for even the most well-intentioned of individuals. The acquisition of the Eye of Malachite was a turning point in the war for the dying Earth. The artifact was incredibly powerful, and had the potential to alter the course of the conflict in significant ways. Grum and Elspeth knew that they needed to use the eye wisely if they were to have any chance of saving the world from destruction. They traveled to the heart of the conflict, where the forces of darkness were gathering to unleash their ultimate weapon. The skies were darkened by the smoke of burning cities, and the ground was stained with the blood of the fallen. Grum and Elspeth could feel the weight of the world on their shoulders, but they also knew that they had the power to make a difference. Amara used her magic to summon a powerful storm, and the Eye of Malachite allowed her to control its intensity and direction. The storm was unleashed upon the army of darkness, unleashing lightning bolts and torrents of rain upon their ranks. The dark forces were caught off guard, and many were struck down by the lightning or drowned in the floods. Grum used his skills as a strategist to coordinate the attacks of the various factions that had joined forces with them. With the Eye of Malachite on their side, they were able to cut through the enemy lines like a hot knife through butter. The armies of darkness were thrown into disarray, and many of their commanders were killed or captured. As the battle raged on, Grum and Amara continued to use the Eye of Malachite to their advantage. Elspeth summoned powerful earthquakes that caused the enemy lines to buckle and break, while Grum used his skills as a sellsword to take out key targets and to rally the troops. Finally, after weeks of intense fighting, the forces of darkness were defeated. The skies cleared, and the sun shone once again upon the world. Grum and Amara had used the Eye of Malachite to turn the tide of the war, and to save the world from destruction. Their names became legends, and their deeds were sung by bards for generations to come.